Hi everyone, I got some exciting news. I started writing Surf King children books. If you got little ones who love the ocean, adventure, and the thrill of the waves, these stories are perfect for them. My first book, Fall of Kai, a 6-year-old surf lover and his beach adventure. Plus, I got more stories on the way, including one about a motocross riding, wave catching, ballet dancing girl named Stella. You can check them out on Amazon soon. I love your support and feedback. Let's get more kids talk on surfing. Aloha! Welcome to the 10th episode of the 12th series of the Temple of Surf, the podcast. Today, we are talking with Richard Yelland, a talented surf filmmaker known for his stunning cinematography and storytelling. Get ready to dive in the world of surf through his lens. Hello, Richard. Welcome to the show. Where are you today?
I'm in Laguna Beach, California.
Wow. So how the situation over there? Your family, it's okay? Everybody's safe? I know the wildfire were like quite heavy over there.
Thank you for asking. We are right on a canyon here, and we were evacuated in 2018 for a fire in our area. And it's a really scary situation. And the days of the Palisades fire, we had 100-mile-per-hour winds whipping through here, east to west toward the ocean. So we were nervous that any kind of spark in our canyon would have burned us down very fast. There's nothing that can be done when the winds are blowing like that, so direct and just so powerfully. Nothing like we'd ever seen, because they're calling them wind waves, where it was hurricane force winds, but not swirling, but just in a direct east to west. That's why Palisades just burnt straight down. I mean, there's no stopping it, even if you're prepared. And so I know there's been a lot of talk about that, and we learn things every fire. So our town here in Laguna Beach, a lot of it burned down in the 90s, and we learned from that. And we have a lot more vigilance and a lot more fire preparedness, and we are mitigating for fire too. Like, we actually have goats that move around our town to eat the brush down and things like that, where you're doing everything you can. Infrared lookout with helicopters and planes doing infrared camera to keep an eye for fires, people on lookout, people with dogs in the canyon sniffing for fire. So the day that was the big day in LA, we had 2 small fires start, but they were stopped before they were fully lit. So fortunate, we're okay, but we're really feeling for our friends in LA, and lots of work associates, family of people we work with losing homes, and doing what we can to support. Like Florence Marine X here had a clothing and food drive with Surfer Magazine and the lifeguards at locally, and a lot of people came out and supported, whether that was like bringing things, donated items, or loading trucks, etc. It was really cool to see the community rally. So we're doing good, but live and learn. It's been a tough time.
Definitely, it's been a huge tragedy, and of course, I'm happy to hear that your family is okay. So that's great.
Thank you.
And as well, we always say in the surf culture, that surfers help each other, right? And it's good to see. It's fantastic to see how the community, as you said, get together into helping each other in this moment of difficulties, and at large, not only surfers, of course, but of course, California at large is a city full of surfers. So
you bring up the surf tribe, and that was definitely, you felt that surfers looking out for surfers, and it connects to that waterman community. I was a lifeguard, so you saw the local lifeguards getting involved as well. And like I said, Surfer Magazine, Jake Howard there really rallied, and then Florence Marine X giving their parking lot and being able to rally people together and just get people out. It was really impressive and very heartening. So you feel like everyone has your back, right? If this happened to us, you feel like people would have your back, right? So it's very cool to see that community. And you also get that feeling like it's more about our lives and less about our material things, right? It's easy for me to say I didn't lose everything, but I think at the end of the day, that's what it's about: community, and it's about that larger group and supporting each other for sure. And you feel that great support within the surfing and waterman community.
Definitely. I didn't know you were like a lifeguard, so
Yeah.
glad to hear that. What was the best teaching that you had as a lifeguard?
Respect the ocean, understand that it's way bigger than you and its power is humbling, and that you also need to take care of the ocean. It will take care of you back. So, learning from an early age, we need to look out for our ocean and the ecosystems. And that again, we in the ocean, we look out for each other. So when I'm not lifeguarding, I'm on a surfboard, and there's off season when the lifeguards aren't in the towers. I'm still looking out for people. Like I remember one day, just at our local surf break here at Thalia Street, it was just a really powerful west swell, and it was a warm day, so it was off season, and you had people that didn't know what they were doing come to the beach and go for a swim. And I made 3 rescues that day on my surfboard, so it's definitely, and then when you go to the North Shore, the stakes are even higher, right? The waves are even bigger, and the life and death stakes just go up from there. So I think when I did a film with big wave surf legend Greg Long, the most decorated big wave surfer of all time, actually, I learned from him too. Just when we were filming him swimming here locally, it was a small day, and just the amount of care that he has and attention he pays to the ocean, and the way that the water. I almost lost my camera that day. I was climbing on a rock from a raft, like to a reef where I was filming him, and it was just kind of stuck in my mind because on the smallest days, we're not paying as much attention to the power of the ocean, and so that's when in lifeguards, we've seen that some of the worst things can happen on the small days. So the ocean is really, it's quite humbling, scary, and also, but powerful, and we can learn from it. We gain so much from it. And so I think as a lifeguard, it's a continual relationship. As you grow older, you gain more respect for the ocean, and you're more thankful for all that it gives us. And this great surfing industry and community, and it all comes from the ocean. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't have anything of it. So any of it. So
Yeah.
being thankful for the ocean.
Oh, definitely. I mean, people with the surf pool, they found a way to get get away from it. But nevertheless, yes, like 99% of the surfers surfs in the ocean, and it's fantastic. When you were talking, I was thinking about the Hawaiian mana, right? The power that in the ocean and the spirituality of the ocean itself. So when you said you need to give to the ocean and the ocean will give back to you.
Yeah.
I guess on a positive way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's so true, because if it doesn't start from us as surfers, who else supposed to take care of the ocean, right?
Yes. And I think we're in the water. I mean, I'm in the water several times each week. So when things go wrong in the water, I'm the first to feel it, right? Whether it's a sewage spill or an oil spill, or it's a red tide. Red tide is a naturally occurring thing, but red tides can be caused also by environmental factors. So you see the impact on the wildlife and on the ecosystem firsthand. And also, it's a sacred space. When you go to the ocean, you're kind of seeking refuge from this chaotic Western world that we live in. So it just like it more and more to me, I feel like we need to do what we can. For example, I just did a screening on my latest film, Birth of the End of Summer, with Surfrider Jersey Shore at Asbury Park, New Jersey, and they're currently fighting the oil drilling that's proposed there. And I really commend them and their efforts because, we deal with that with offshore drilling here off of Huntington Beach, and some of the issues that can come from that. So it just isn't worth it, right? I think that for how fragile our ecosystems are, so that we need to stand up and fight to protect our ocean and do what we can for it. So I think Surfrider, they do an incredible job on a local level. There are these community chapters, and they will fight for the issues right off their coastlines or on their beach. So, another beach, it might be erosion due to jetties that they're fighting, or another beach in, for example, Malibu or elsewhere in the country where they're fighting for access, for public to access their right to the beach. I did a short film with the Surfrider Foundation called The Martins Five, and it was a multi-generational beach surfing, fishing area that had been open for over 100 years, and that people that grew up there in Martins Beach in Half Moon Bay had access to the beach. And then someone bought the land and closed the access. And the Constitution says that you have a right to access your public resources. So surfers were the ones that stood up and said, we're going to go surfing, and we have a right to the ocean. And they crossed the land, they got arrested, and there was a kind of a landmark court case we get to follow, Martins Five, that we did, and we were able to capture and go into the trial. And as the case was thrown out, it was a landmark victory for surfers, for people that wanted to access their ocean. And the reasoning is that if you have a right to that ocean, right, that then there was clearance or access before that, and people just can't come and put a fence up and keep you from it. So that was, I think, again, with you realize surfers coming together for a cause like that, we as filmmakers being able to tell stories around that, to get out to public opinion and really push for, we can make change if we get behind these issues. And that short film is incredible. Like, we had coverage as far as Al Jazeera and Washington Post and The Atlantic just from doing the short film around this. And obviously, really a testimony to the Surfriders' great work, because their headquarters is involved, but ultimately it was the chapter in Half Moon Bay that took a stand, was writing their congressmen and their congresswomen and saying, this is wrong, we're gonna fight this. And it was years-long battle. And then once the court case was overturned, it still wasn't done, because the landowner continued to just keep the gate closed.
But like giving a voice for people that not to have one. I mean, it's important, because I guess those surfers, without the help of surf riders or whatnot, maybe would have been fined or charged for trespassing. And they need to know that they are not alone. They have a community behind them, and that protects them. Of course, we need to do things lawfully, but I guess nowhere in the world you should appropriate yourself of a part of our ocean. Maybe we can discuss about beach, and that's maybe a different word. I'm not an expert, but ocean should be free for everyone. Otherwise, if we start to sell the ocean, it will be kind of a issue, right?
Yeah, I think and that's sort of where it gets to that line of drilling into that ocean. And there's alternative energy sources. We don't need to drill into that ocean, right? We don't need to drill into that reef at Jopu to build a temporary judging tower. Like, we just don't need to do it. And we, the surfers, have that voice where we can stand up. I think that I'm learning about great groups that are fighting just for the coral alone. I learned about the Coral Gardeners, I believe they're called, but also my good friends at Sea Trees and Sustainable Surf, who I try to partner with as much as I can. The Sea Trees, they're planting mangroves, and that is a 5 times more carbon reductive tree than your standard tree. Not saying the standard tree in the forest is incredibly valuable, but the mangrove trees that the Sea Tree Foundation are planting are 5 times more carbon reductive, and they're also helping balance the aquatic ecosystems. And they're doing seaweed restoration and kelp restoration and things like that. So it's all hands on deck.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Definitely. And Surf Riders is doing a fantastic job all over the world.
Yeah, and I think You bring a good point too. I think we locally, right, like in our fires, we had our local fires, but you look at like the larger surfing community. Florence Marine X is based Hawaii. They're based here too, but you have our friends from out of state sending goods in too, and that we start locally, right, with our efforts, but we get support from other states and from other countries too. That people, we're all connected, and so I think with all the issues in the world right now, we can get a little overwhelmed and feel like, okay, my one individual action can't make a difference. But you look at these great groups of people like the Surfrider chapters, like I mentioned, they're a small group of people who have a mission together, and that their action singularly, right, is so powerful. And then you connect that to the other efforts, Surfrider efforts around the country, and it adds up to a really big, powerful, strong voice, and also the ability to make change at scale.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, a scale is so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we are deep into conversation already. There is always a question that I ask at the beginning of the podcast, but I was interested on the lifeguard story, and then we discuss about ocean. But nevertheless,
yeah, feel free too, because this is maybe off our topic. Feel free to cut whatever you.
Actually, I love it because it's like as genuine as it gets, So I am sure that people listening to us, they go into this journey with us, and then I don't know where it goes, where it's gonna end, but we speak, that's the most important thing. But there is a question that I always use to start the podcast with. What, in your opinion, what is the most important thing in surfing?
Preserving our stories and appreciating the people that came before, so we can continue to create legacy moving forward. And at the same time, by looking back as well at what we had in the past and some of the things that we cherish, we can also protect that for the future. And like I said, we were talking about ocean ecosystem and keeping the ocean healthy. We need to keep ourselves healthy and the ocean healthy. And I think it's really important to understand what past generations are doing, what current generations are doing, and how we're passing that on to the next generation. It's stewardship of our culture, our history, and of our environmental mindedness.
Definitely. I am always like not surprised, but amazed by the fact that surf culture is relatively young, in the sense that I don't want to go back to the Hawaiian or Peruvian. There is an Italian guy that is saying, Nick Zanella, that is Chinese, that discovers surf. Actually, I say hi to him because he's a very nice guy. But nevertheless, I don't want to go back into this. But relatively, like the first world champion, 1946, right? And it's not that far away, right? And but there are so many amazing stories to tell, which is fantastic, no?
Yeah.
It's like everywhere you move, you look into Australia, you look in South Africa, America, of course, California, Hawaii. There is surf culture is so rich.
Yes. And my friend, the filmmaker David Mesvin, and his project, Wade in the Water, which gets into the connection between African Americans and the ocean dating back to the African times, and really in that effort trying to connect and reclaim their history of ocean peoples that really predates all of our modern history, right? And you look at the ancient Hawaiian culture of surfing. So there's so many stories beyond our modern day sport of surfing. So I like to separate it into the sport of modern surfing, which you mentioned, the first world championship in the 1940s, and then the ancient stories as well, which is a whole other realm of storytelling. So it gets a bit overwhelming, as you said. So for the time being, I'm focusing my filmmaking work and storytelling on the sport of modern surfing. And then obviously where applicable, connecting the dots to some of those older stories if it's important for the history.
Among all the stories that you had the opportunity to focus on, let's say, or to
Yeah.
portray, which one is the dearest one to you? Like the one you're more attached to?
I did a film called 12 Miles North, a Nick Gabaldon story, and it was an untold piece of surfing history. And the ability to dig that up and having the opportunity to tell that story was really powerful. And it gave me an inspiration to continue to do what I do. It was only really my second film or third, and it was early in my filmmaking career. And the excitement of digging up a real story, one that started as really a myth, is an oral history story about an African American surfer named Nick Gabaldon, who supposedly surfed during the divided times, California, late 1940s, when California was a little more liberal than other parts of the country, but still it was a very racially divided time. And there was a beach called the Inkwell Beach. Well, quote unquote, the Inkwell. Many people called it that. Even the people of color called it that. It was a place where they went to the beach where they felt comfortable, where they wouldn't be harassed in Los Angeles, late 1940s. And they had a beach culture, a water culture, and there were some lifeguards involved in the birth of the modern sport of surfing, like Buzzy Trent and Ricky Grigg and Peter Cole, who became big wave surf legends in Hawaii. But they started in LA as lifeguards in the late 1940s. And they pioneered Malibu as this world-class sport, of surfing and this culture, right? It started here. There was only a few spots at that time in California. You had San Onofre, and you had Malibu, and you had Rincon, right? Some of these early days spots that became the focus of our modern sport and became this place, right, where the whole culture started. And Nick Gabaldon, so the story went, was among those pioneering surfers at Malibu with Ricky Grigg, and like I said, and Matt Kivlin, Joe Quigg, Mickey Munoz. And so Nick Gabaldon supposedly had paddled 12 miles from this beach called the Inkwell, and in Santa Monica, LA. And so it just seemed too wild to be true. And he apparently had died in a tragic south swell, huge swell, and it was only mentioned a few words in the original Gidget book about the black boy that died at the pier. And so it was a group of pioneering black surfers that formed the early Black Surfers Association, who were really digging up and telling his story early on, because Nick Gabaldon was an inspiration for the Black Surf movement. And I was able to come along and get to know them and the research that they had done. And at that time as well, they had recently put a plaque down at the Inkwell Beach in Nick Gabaldon's honor, and to cement his legacy as the first documented surfer of color. And you also had Dr. Allison Jefferson, who her whole study was to reclaim African American history, California leisure from that era up and down the coast. So her work was pivotal. There was Rhonda from Black Girls Surf, who was really pivotal in that early recognition of Nick Gabaldon as an important surfer, especially for those people of color. But yeah, I think there's so much attached to that story. I mean, it is our Jackie Robinson story of the sport of surfing. So with my ability to tell 12 Miles North, while the pioneers, I was able to interview Ricky Grigg and Peter Cole, and I was able to interview Mickey Munoz. And for Ricky Grigg, like, Nick Gabaldon made a huge impression on him. So to capture that interview with him was really pivotal for history, in that he was there and he surfed with Nick Gabaldon, and he was a fan of Nick Gabaldon. He was a well-spoken, well-read poetry student at Santa Monica City College. He wrote a poem days before he died called Lost Lives, about men losing their lives to the sea. And some would call it a premonition. And in the film 12 Miles North, we had everyone who was part of the film read a line from the poem. So it was very powerful. But there's so many layers to this story. but really important was to learn through these firsthand accounts how cool it was that Nick Calvedon was part of that origination of modern surfing at Malibu, and that it was a physical feat to paddle 12 miles to get there, and he also wasn't necessarily welcome by everyone either, being a person of color. So there were so many things and so many levels to this story, and to be able to tell it, to save the story, and honor Nick Gabaldon and put him there and as a legacy for the Black surfers to follow. Because 10 years later, the Black surfing movement and Black Lives Matter movement, you have a whole new crew of Black surfers and Black filmmakers who were inspired by 12 Miles North and by Nick Gabaldon's story. And now there's a National Historic Site where Nick Gabaldon learned to surf at the quote unquote Inkwell Beach or Bay Street. And that is right by the Casa del Mar Hotel, which is a historic building. But there used to be a beach club there in the late 1940s. And there was a fence with barbed wire that separated that beach club from the Inkwell Beach. And it wasn't a segregated beach, but you'll see pictures, African-American beachgoers up against that barbed wire fence. And it's just very symbolic of the time. And yeah, I think that the fact that what we were able to do just to tell that story, preserve that history, win Best Webby Award for the sports film of the year. That was 2014 by the time that happened. But yeah, I think that it sticks with me because I see the power that we have. And I mean, just as filmmakers, storytellers, as surfers, and just a Black History Month screening at our local theater at the Rivian South Coast Theater here in Laguna Beach, we filled the place. It was a 12 Miles North Black History Month screening. And then we had David Mesfin and a group of Black filmmakers and Black surfers and people who are in the film and part of the Black Surfing Association, Black Surfers Collective, came to the screening. And it was just so powerful that, the next generation is now taking this and running with it. So, I mean, I have many different stories, like my current film, Birth of the End of the Summer, which is the untold story of Dick Metz and how he inspired Bruce Brown and the most watched and beloved film of all time, surf film of all time, Bruce Brown's The Endless Summer. That film, Birth of the Endless Summer, and you can find us on Instagram at Birth of the Endless Summer. That film really jumps off from my work on 12 Miles North, because what I was inspired by in the ability to tell an untold story and preserve that history and also inspire future generations, that was the motivation behind doing my Birth of the Endless Summer film, which when Bruce Brown passed away, filmmaker Bruce Brown, I realized the best way to tribute him and his work on The Endless Summer and other films and his ability as a connector. I mean, Bruce Brown's The Endless Summer connects every generation of surfer. And so I really personally loved this idea that we as surfers could agree on one thing. I think every single surfer would say that The Endless Summer has impacted them in some way. And if they hadn't seen it, when they watch it, they'll say that The Endless Summer has impacted them and will change their lives. And so to tell the untold story of Dick Metz traveled the globe from 1958 to 1961 as the first surf pioneer, first surf traveler, probably one of the first known adventure travelers before Jack Kerouac and On the Road and Che Guevara and Motorcycle Diaries. That Dick Metz's story, again, is one we can't lose, right? Because it's a story that's in a way bigger than The Endless Summer, because The Endless Summer is a piece of pop culture. It's so iconic and so powerful, but it throws a lot of shade. I think people can look at that shade in a good way, not in a negative way, but it's just so iconic. It can blanket the whole 60s and make it feel like that is surfing in the 60s when there's so much more to the story. And so Dick Metz had a hand in not only inspiring Bruce Brown, but he opened the first surf shops with Hobie Alter. So he had a hand in the evolution of surfboard making from wood to resin. I mean, it's unbelievable, Dick Metz's story. And I think anyone who knows it will say that he is one of the most influential and incredible stories in surf history. Among those, like in the same sentence as Duke Kahanamoku is Dick Metz. It's amazing. So at Birth of the Endless Summer on Instagram, check us out. We're still doing some limited theater screenings. We are on PBS, so check your local listings. And Birth of the End of the Summer will also be launching in all the digital platforms this summer of 2025.
I get so upset that you guys, in US enjoy all these fantastic films, and
Yeah.
us on the other side of the world are like, we have no way to go and see them, and we have to wait our turn. So
Yeah.
I like the fact that they're coming to us step by.
Yeah, on this release, in a way, I feel bad, and I'm glad you bring this up because we have fans and audience members who are really frustrated that we're still 2 years later, if not 3 years, still not on digital. And I would say that when I do it again, I'm going to get to digital faster. But we did have the pandemic, and the pandemic slowed our film festival release because we were just coming out of the pandemic. We were just going to live events. So it took a long time. It took a longer amount of time. It took 2 years of film festivals to really get the same as we would get out of a year festival run. And then when we got out of our festival run, the whole documentary distribution like business just collapsed. So the normal route would have been going to a company like 1099 Films or, you name the distributor. They all collapsed. They all went out of business. And so now hopefully the landscape's realigning, and that by the time my next film, Mrs. Pipeline, comes out, that we're going to have a more, how would you say it, predictable distribution strategy and execution on that. But yeah, I'm glad you bring up accessibility. And I think that we want to figure out how we can better get ourselves to the global audience and not just putting it to the internet right away. So that's the thing. On the same hand, too, like we as creators and filmmakers, we need to protect ourselves. And the answer isn't necessarily to get those films right out to the internet. I think we need to hold on to things and be thoughtful, especially with some of these more important things, how we put them out so they can create value. Because these releases need to have value for us to sustain a surf filmmaking industry. And right now, it's a very difficult time to be an independent filmmaker, to put it lightly.
Just for you to know that on the other side of the
the world island
of the big island, there is like people that are ready to do whatever to see those movies. DVD, you name it, but we are ready because we are like we're not treated in the same way than our American surfer colleagues, and so
yeah.
But anyway, look, luckily there are some surf film festivals across Europe where, if we are lucky enough to be there, we have the opportunity to see some of the movies.
Yeah, and maybe too, this also tells me that we need to expand our network of international screenings too. Like I would love to make a connection with a film festival in Abu Dhabi. We have screened a lot of my films at SAL, which is Surf at Lisbon in Portugal, for example. We've got relationships with the Australian film festivals. I would love to build more relationships with the film festivals in South America. My film Birth of the End of the Summer is on Globo down there, their largest network in South America. But yeah, I think that it's really, I would love to make more relationships with European film festivals. And, there seems to be a real hunger for our surf films in England too. And these fan bases are really rabid, like you said too. So we can have really nice screenings where everyone comes out.
Yeah, because you see, like for instance, I give you the example of our Japanese friends. They consume surf, right? Maybe for the Californian market or American market, oh my God, another surf movie. Oh my God, another thing. For us, it's like, no, we still want that. We want to anyway. I'm sure that now maybe you're gonna think about it to improve this.
Yeah, I think. Well, for sure, I think this time around, I'm gonna, knowing how it works, really from Birth of the End of the Summer, because we didn't have the regular distribution like we would. I had to really experiment with the pop-up screening idea, and it was much better than that traditional theater release. So we did some theater releases, and it just like it didn't. The way marketing is now, you're not going to get a big Hollywood media budget. So a regular theater release just it really is not going to work. So these film festival screenings, these pop-up screenings where we can find that fan base there in the community, we can do really nice things. So I'm going to be focusing on that far before I release my next film, Mrs. Pipeline. We're going to figure out in advance like a tour that where we can take it all to Abu Dhabi, to Morocco, you know, because I've had people write in from Morocco like, oh, we're dying. We want to see that. We'll screen it. We'll have you. We'll fly you there, you know. So next time we'll plan it that way, and we'll do a really nice year-long tour and try to hit as many spots as we can and connect with the community. Because what's really cool, what I've seen, and I kind of channel Bruce Brown when we were touring around, like, oh God, like we don't have distribution. The distribution is a mess for films now, for documentary films. Like we're just gonna have to go and like do screenings and travel and see people. And what happened is it was like channeling Bruce Brown when he first started with the Endless Summer. It was 1964. He did not have distribution for 2 years, and he went and toured with the film, and he narrated on stage. And so there's no better model to follow. So just get out with your film and tour with it, see people, get the community together. It's a lot of fun, and then you build your audience that way. So you know, we're still building our fan base for Birth of the Endless Summer. And again, at Birth of the Endless Summer on Instagram, just our recent Surfrider Jersey Shore screening raised great money for Surfrider and their efforts to stop drilling off the coast there, but also build our fan base as we go. So yeah, it's been where the adversity in the world of filmmaking and the difficulty with distribution nowadays, that can be a blessing as you come up with new ideas and new ways, or old ways, when you follow Bruce Brown's path.
Yeah. Well, Bruce Brown, of course, was an iconic, it's an iconic man. It's an iconic piece of culture. Of course, as you said, Endless Summer is pop in the expression, you know, but pop culture, but in effect, Bruce Brown was a legendary man, you know. It's like
he's the core. He's still a core surfer and represents the core authentic culture of what it means to be a surfer. And as Kelly Slater said in the film, he said the Endless Summer lifted the veil on what surfing was and all about, and that we're able to, through watching the Endless Summer, really understand who we are as surfers and what motivates us. And Jamie Brisick, the known surf writer, former pro surfer, Fulbright scholar, even probably one of the few, if not the only Fulbright pro surfer, right? Fulbright scholar, wrote, he did a companion book for Birth of the Endless Summer called Birth of the Endless Summer, A Surf Odyssey. So you can check out the book, companion book to the film as well, by visiting scrib.com and searching for Birth of the Endless Summer, A Surf Odyssey. And Rob Machado, thank you, Rob, for voicing that book. But it's basically stories from the sea. And Jamie Brisick gets into the Endless Summer inspiration from different surf legends across the decades. And so what it means to be a surfer. And Jamie Brisick, through his work on the Endless Summer, or Birth of the Endless Summer, A Surf Odyssey, but he proclaimed that to be a surfer is to be a traveler. And Dick Metz was the first traveler surfer, and he is our central character in Birth of the Endless Summer. And so I think that is what we do is we learn who we are as surfers, and we tell stories around that. And then that's how we protect our culture and our legacy moving forward.
Definitely. So my question is, how cool is connecting the dots? It's fantastic, you know, like to go through a story and be able to go surfer to surfer, story to story, and see that all the stories that interlace each other. I found it so fascinating, isn't it?
It's what it is for me. I mean, for me personally, you hit the nail on the head. I love connecting the dots through surfers and their stories, and how we're all connected through our common bonds, our common beliefs, and And it's beautiful when you get to the North Shore too. I was just there recently filming for Mrs. Pipeline. The North Shore community, there's so much love there and respect for the ocean and for each other in the water and looking out for each other, that it kind of gives me goosebumps, because it's just so powerful what we have as surfers, right? And it's so giving, and that we need to really recognize that, feel that, and celebrate it. And that's what, with Mrs. Pipeline, my new film, is connecting the dots from the first Mr. Pipeline and relatively untold story. Butch VanArtsdalen was the first Mr. Pipeline in the early 1960s, the first to really get barreled there. You know, there were other first riders like Bill Edwards, but Butch VanArtsdalen is considered the father of the tube ride, and he was the first Mr. Pipeline, and he passed that torch to Jock Sutherland, who then really influenced Jerry Lopez. And people call Jerry Lopez the Mr. Pipeline, the first, and it wasn't him. It was Butch VanArtsdalen. And so with Mrs. Pipeline, we're able to connect those dots from first Mr. Pipeline, how that torch was passed. And when I interviewed Jock Sutherland about his belief in what it means to be a good pipeline surfer, he said it wasn't about being the best surfer at pipeline, that it was about passing the knowledge along to the next generation. And I was kind of blown away by that. And that when Jerry Lopez received his honor a few years ago from numerous groups to continue to honor, right, his legacy as an iconic pipeline surfer, Jerry Lopez, first person to thank was Jock Sutherland. And he thanked Jock Sutherland, saying, Jock Sutherland gave me a sense of place. That pipeline is a special place. And that when you look at it that way, you take care of the people there, you take care of that environment. And then you pass that stewardship and that respect on to the next generation. And that with each, in Mrs. Pipeline, as we follow the story from iconic surfers, from the new pioneer, the old pioneers, the original pioneers like Butch VanArtsdalen and Jock Sutherland, Jerry Lopez, we're following this history through the modern day to the new pioneers of pipeline, which are the women. And you look at someone like Mana Jones Wong, as the queen of pipeline, undisputed queen of pipeline, who's won many contests at pipe now, is someone who is all about giving back to the ocean, giving back to her community. She studied Hawaiian health and healing as a major at University of Hawaii. She's got her surf camp and teaching that next generation of girls how to surf at pipeline. And she is all about giving back. And so it's so beautiful to be able to connect the dots from the beginning of pipeline history to the modern day and find those commonalities, that these are special things that transcend generations, that we can hold up as these values, because that is going to make us better moving forward. If we can stick to these traditions of respecting each other, respecting the ocean, we're going to all be better for it. And we're going to solve some of the problems that are inherent in Western culture right now, which is racial divides, which is social injustice, which is environmental injustice. That if we learn to respect and understand each other better from these lessons, and we learn how to take better care of our ecosystems and our oceans, we're going to set a shining example. And really, it's undeniable. It's just a beautiful thing to feel, witness, and behold. And when you feel it, as we get to do in filmmaking, when you feel it, the idea is that we can inspire it to happen and make people aspire to those kinds of lifestyles and values, and passing it on.
We should ask to Jock Sutherland if he wants to be the next president after this mandate.
Jock is happy. He's happy doing roofs on the North Shore.
I know. I spoke with him as well. He told me, I'm doing the church roof, so I'm really busy.
How fitting. He's doing the roof of the church. That's so fitting of Jock Sutherland. Love that.
Yeah, fantastic, And we all, yes, of course, as a surf culture, we need to say thank to him, not only Jerry Lopez, of course, but
Yeah.
also us. And I think behind what he told you, the phrase that he told you, is the culture of aloha. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's doing everything with a purpose. And I guess passing the torch to new generation is not only about style of surfing or a wave that you surf. Look at the Greg Knoll Waimea. Today it can be considered a small wave if we go for Mavericks or Nazare, right? But that
Yeah.
time was the biggest wave ever. So there are so many things that are beyond just passing the torch of surfing. Is like sharing the culture, and the culture is sometimes putting others before yourself, and allowing the spirit to continue beyond the surfer is himself or herself. And
I think that's, yeah, no, I think that is, I want to bring up one more great example of the working on the new film, Mrs. Pipeline, that I was fortunate to interview Clyde Eichau. And it was a beautiful moment when he came to tears talking about the Beach Boy tradition in Hawaii, and that he was honored as in that top three from Duke Kanemoko to Rabbi Kakai, and then third Clyde Eichau. And for him, it brought tears to his eyes, because what that means is not just that iconic history of being a waterman in the history of the Beach Boys and all that Duke stand for, beyond surfing, but that also as an example of passing on the tradition to the next generation, as Clyde Eichau does now with Ha Eichau and his Eddie Eichau Foundation and Eddie Invitational, and how he gives back so much through the efforts to give a certain amount of stewardship and spirit and story and a sense of history and tradition to the next generation. And I think that's what he is all about. And he told me that Clyde Eichau told me that for him it was really hard after Eddie passed away for him to go on, but when he finally did, he took time off, a couple years. He finally realized, like, I have to continue my work for Eddie's legacy. And that is I think Clyde Eichau is a really good example of that spirit that Duke Kanemoku stands for, of giving that to the next generation, and sharing all that's beautiful about the ocean to the next generation and to the world.
Definitely. So connecting the dot, part one, of course, you're talking about Butch VanArtsdalen, and there is a picture of him that I find recently. I don't know if you see this one, and you have the Duke, you have Fred Hemmings, you have Joey Cabell, and you have Paul Strauch.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And those were like the guys, right? Those the four guys. The Duke, of course, already that legend, the one that we can easily define as like the I don't know, the best four. Like the incredible minus plus with the Duke, right? Those guys are super pop.
Yeah, it was a pantheon. It was like, the Super Friends, like the cartoon, because you had of that group, Fred Hemmings, Paul Stroud, Joey Cabell, Butch VanArtsdalen, and you had everyone at the top of their game, and each having a certain specialty, right? I mean, I just was able to interview Joey Cabell, and he was really just, pioneer and number one at everything he put his mind to. And, someone like that, whether it's skateboarding or snowboarding, the guy's radical, and Butch VanArtsdalen committing his life to pipeline and giving up a pro baseball career to come to Hawaii and pursue pipeline and making it his life. And, Paul Stroud, arguably one of the best surfers that ever lived, right? Just no matter how you look at it. And when I interviewed Paul, the thing he gave to me was that he got from his father, a legendary waterman surfer, was to thank the water every time you step to the water's edge. You thank it before you enter it. And so there's a certain spirituality to Paul Stroud surfing that comes through, and then you have obviously Fred Hemmings, who's a titan in surf history, not just for his big wave prowess but his commitment to the sport and his belief that whatever you feel about his politics, his belief that surfing was a legitimate sport and needed a legitimate tour, a legitimate contest to be taken seriously. So yeah, I think across the range of the Duke surf team, Butch VanArtsdalen, Fred Hemmings, Paul Stroud, and Joey Cabell, and Duke himself as the leader of that team. I mean, it's just, I don't think there's any more legendary surf team in history, you know? It's incredible. It's really amazing.
Yeah. And okay, maybe it's a silly question, but because you're a professional filmmaker and you interview legendary names, but when you when you meet these legends, like some of them, unfortunately, they're not with us anymore. You never realize when you are interviewing them, oh my God, I have in front of me, I don't know, like somebody that is bigger than just an interview. You're like legs shaking, or you are like kind of full of adrenaline? Do you feel that, or you always keep it?
I do. And it's interesting because I've interviewed a lot of famous people, outside of surfing too. And so, and I've shot commercials with people at the top of motocross, or people, famous authors or famous filmmakers or artists and big celebrities. And, I think if there's a legitimate story and there's something interesting to talk about, I liken my job to having interesting conversations with really amazing people, because the people that, let's say 9 out of 10 of those people that get to certain places in their careers, they have a certain mindset and they've learned certain things along the way to get there. So I come into the interviews that way. Not saying that sometimes I don't get a little starstruck. It just gets me a little more on point. When I get a little nervous, I just get a little sharper, and a little less apt to and ah, right? Because I don't want to get kicked out of the interview. I had Jeff Clark once, and known for his pioneering of Mavericks, kicked me out of an interview once, and I had to convince him to continue it. So I know that in those situations, I can actually, even if I'm kicked out of the interview, I can talk my way back. I mean, it happened to me with Mike Hinson. And I was a bit Mike Hinson of the Endless Summer fame, right? I was pretty intimidated. I mean, this guy, he's not even alive. He's so big. He's such an icon of our sport. It's unbelievable. And so I spoke to him on the phone before I interviewed him. And it was such a great conversation that I came into the interview feeling like, okay, I got this. I'm going to come in and we're just going to hang out and have a great conversation, me and Mike Hinson, right? And you're not thinking about who he is, and I'm not thinking about who I am. I mean, I'm seeking the story. I'm not looking to advance my career. I come in humble because it's the truth. I'm seeking the story, and I'm not seeking to elevate my status or my film. I am legitimately following the story, and that's the difference. And I think that helps me. But when you meet Mike Hinson, even after having a great conversation with him on the phone, he's like, I'm over it. Like, who are you guys? Like, what are you doing here? Like, trying to tell this story again. I've told it too many times. Like, he forgot who I was, or he just wasn't in the mood. He didn't want to be in our movie. And somehow I talked my way back into it. And fortunately, we got that interview for Birthday in the Summer, because it's the best interview in the film, because he's a great counterpoint to Robert August, who's like, I admire Robert, and he was just more simpatico with Bruce Brown and Bruce Brown's approach. But Mike Hinson is a great just counterpoint. That, like, he was his own spirit. He was as original as they get, and he had his own point of view. Like it or not, he was going to say it, and he offers a great insight into how he felt things went down at Cape St. Francis. What's so awesome is that both he and Robert were in awe, and both giddy and the breath of taken away after hours of surfing, and to hear them recount that story is so beautiful. What we're getting at, though, do I get intimidated by certain interviews? I think, I did feel that with Clyde Eichow, maybe more than any, because the weight of that interview and like the legacy he carries across generations and the importance of the interview, knowing that it might be one of the last films that Clyde Eichow is in, is this Mrs. Pipeline film, because he's not in good health. Like that, I was overwhelmed a little bit with the power of that, right? Like the importance of the interview got on my mind. And again, not because of his celebrity and not necessarily because I'm trying to advance the film or my career, but just like the weight of history, like when you are interviewing. And I think I sense that now. Before, when I was telling stories, untold stories, that we were getting these legends to speak, I didn't realize as much as I do now, like how soon they'll be gone and this will be the last evidence we have. So I really felt that in my recent interview with Clyde, which put extra pressure to really go deep on his story. And he, obviously didn't want to spend all, it was just lucky we got him for 30 minutes, but he ended up hanging out for an hour, which is amazing. So I'm thankful. I'm very grateful to everyone I get to talk to. And, I try to build trust. And again, I think it's because I come in authentically wanting to tell the story and not to advance a career or a marketing campaign.
Oh, definitely. And I think, what you told me at the beginning of the interview, preserving surf history is, you are aware of that piece of interview video, the things that you cut and you assemble in order to create the final product, the film. All those things 50 years from now will be archives, that will preserve the surf culture all over the world. And maybe in China, they will go crazy for surfing and they want to know more about all these people that were in California, in Hawaii. And the only way to know is through articles, but as well through your films, podcasts, things that were able to capture, maybe just for half an hour, the juice, the lighting bulb, they were saying pure Hawaiian juice.
The essence.
An essence of being a surfer and surf from the time maybe that in Huntington Beach you need to add a sticker on your board, the surf permit, to go and surf until the modern days. And so I think it's very important. And on connecting the dots, you said before about Jamie Brisick, that is in the same series of you. So 3-4 episodes before you. It's fantastic. We didn't know. I didn't know. You didn't know.
Oh, incredible.
And you said thank you to Rob Machado, which I need to thank as well, because Rob Machado was the episode #1 of this podcast. Now,
it's so great. I love it. Yeah, Rob has been really supportive of the stories I'm trying to tell, and people like Pat O'Connell, and who are real. It's hard to put words on how important it is for people like Rob Machado, people like Jamie Brisick and Pat O'Connell and Bob Hurley, and people that support you at early stages of your projects and believe in your projects. And it's a feeling of generosity, right? And Jamie's like a brother in that he has a similar purpose to tell these stories and proliferate these stories and make meaning out of it, and create that brotherhood, right, and that sisterhood, because Jamie is championing the same things, right? Like proliferating these stories, saving our history, giving us examples and inspiration moving forward. Jamie's like an inspirational writer, not just someone who's incredibly in tune with what it means to be a surfer. And like I said, in the book, Birth of the End of the Summer, Surf Odyssey, he says to be a surfer is to be a traveler. And that's for him why the Endless Summer was pivotal, and probably the main reason why he became a surfer and a pro surfer is because of the Endless Summer. And so for him to be able to tell that story and then, tell surfers other stories, that how that film influenced them is so meaningful to him. right? So yeah, I think it's all part of this collective effort, and it is inspirational. And for me as a filmmaker too, I want to bring credibility to surf filmmaking as legitimate filmmaking, right? So I'm not just trying to make a good surf movie. More than that, I never wanted to make a surf movie. I want to make a movie, right? So I think these stories are worthy of that level, right? Of the best of the best, and I think that's what Jamie represents in his writing as well.
Definitely. And you know what I like from your perspective on movie making is the fact that you are always telling the story of someone.
Yeah.
It- and you know, it would be very easy to do a documentary about surfing the 70s in Hawaii, surfing, I don't know, Australia in the 80s or whatnot.
Yeah.
And that would be super interesting, of course, for
Yeah.
the people. But you telling this, actually, we are old people, right? And we like, you know, when we go after the surf, we go back into the shore and we go to the cafe or the bar or whatnot, and we're telling
Yes.
stories, our stories. And so the
Yes.
fact that you are choosing people and you tell stories through the lens of certain people, that can be Dick Metz or can be I don't know one
Doc Sutherland.
or not. And I think it's super interesting because then you kind of hook people, you know,
Yeah.
into their seat, you know, fasten the seatbelt. We're going into a ride, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's definitely a point of strength if you want to catch audience in a different way than traditional.
Yeah, and it's a good example because with the Mrs. Pipeline film that I'm currently in production on, that's a really good example of a story where the history of pipeline would be interesting. But for me, I didn't just want to tell a history book story. I didn't want to do an encyclopedia, right? I'm a creative filmmaker. I'm looking for ways to create and to engage, and obviously connecting those dots from the original pioneer pipeline like Butch VanArtsdalen. And what was he thinking? And what was his story? What made him the first? What was motivating him? The same thing that motivated Moana Jones Wong to be the first women pipe pro winner, like in history, right? So she was scared to walk across the pipeline parking lot, right? She paddled in from the other beach, and she sat on the shoulder for months, if not a year, before she even paddled in to a wave there. And it's like for me, I didn't want to tell a pipeline story. I wanted to talk about what is it that's motivating a pipe surfer, and so I want to connect the first pioneer to the new pioneers, which are the women. The women's story of pipeline, no matter who you talk to, whether it's Jamie O'Brien, Shane Dorian, John Florence, like the women's story of pipeline is the most exciting story. Like what they're doing out there, how fast they're progressing out there, what are some of the things they're doing is so amazing to watch. So that was the key for me. I wouldn't have done this film unless we had that, what I call a modern story arc, which is the women, the new pioneers of pipeline, because that is one of the most exciting, if not most exciting stories in sport right now, not just surfing, but in sport.
Definitely. I totally agree with you. We're going to end our interview today with a short Q&A session. So I'm using the same question for everyone. Please answer the first thing that comes up to your mind. Okay?
Okay.
Best surfboard that you ever rode?
My first surfboard.
What was that?
It was a 70s gun that I learned to surf on that was sold to me by Steve Pesman, who's the founder of Surfer's Journal, when I was a little kid, when I was 11 years old. And it was just a classic gun shape, and it floated me well enough to learn on. It had a Brothers in Arms. It was made by Russell and had a Brothers in Arms logo on it that I found out was designed by Braun Hughes and Sam's dad. And so there's all sorts of history behind that board. I wish I had it, but yeah, the first wave I ever caught and stood up on was on that board. So it had to be that board.
Fantastic. Great story. So who is your favorite shaper of all time?
I get shapes from the Bainey brothers at Infinity, and their dad was Steve Bainey, master shaper, still shaping to this day. And so it's really cool to ride their boards because they're always experimenting with new shapes modern ideas, but they're incorporating some of their dad's successful older ideas too into the boards. And so, it's really fun to ride their shapes. And then also you can pick up a board that's C-shaped too, like this pocket rocket that Steve will shape. It's like an old shape that it's still relevant today. So yeah, the Bainey family is an amazing story themselves. As far as a shaping family, they would be a great episode.
I will look at it. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Favorite song or kind of music?
I'm partial to new music, indie rock.
Okay.
And I started really what broke my boundaries open for creativity was punk rock.
Yeah.
And so I really like it. It just gave me this idea of no rules and finding, new things. I'm always looking for new music. So on the rock and roll front, indie music, punk rock music, American original music. So like Bob Dylan,
Okay.
Wilco. But on the other end of the spectrum, for filmmaking and for the ability to score and create mood and vibe, I would say jazz is a go-to. So jazz is really inspirational in that it has no limits. So there's a range of emotions and things you can experience with jazz. And I tend to like some of those, 60s icons like John Coltrane, Charles Mingus, and so on as Miles Davis early albums. So yeah. And when I'm looking to films, I'm really not like I'm not beholden to one genre. So going as far as I can with my soundtracks.
Nice choice. I agree with you. Favorite surf spot, if it's not a secret?
I've really been enjoying my local breaks here at Crystal Cove State Park just because that I can find days to myself where it gets really good and certain tides and swell directions. I can surf it on my own or with just a small group of people that I've surfed with for years out there. So that would have to be it. And also too, just so beautiful out there. So even when the waves aren't good, we're having incredible interaction with the nature and the wildlife and the dolphins and the birds and the fish and everything out there at Crystal Cove State Park. Very thankful for that place.
Amazing. Looking forward. Maybe one day I can surf it too.
Yeah,
A favorite surfer of all time?
that's a tough one because there are so many obviously amazing surfers across the generations. I mean, on one hand, it's really incredible to see what Kelly Slater can do year in and year out. And part of me, I think that with Kelly and what he can do, it's like wizardry. And so I love watching him surf. But on the other hand, too, I mean, I'm a fan of surf style. So I really love to watch Rob Machado surf, Mikey February surf, and of the previous generations, I mean, I love watching Tyler Warren surf both boards, right? Short or long board. And so I think that there is such a beauty in surfers that can cross generations and those who can really do beautiful things on a longboard.
Yeah, definitely. Last question.
That was one surfer.
If there was one surfer, of course, Kelly has a special place in all of us,
Yeah.
But me, I'm still on Jock Sutherland for president, So when he will finish the roof of the church, not before, because we want that church to have a roof. Finally.
Yeah.
But then, the last question is a little bit unusual. I'd like to know your best relationship advice. Where a relationship can be a friendship, romantic, relationship with the ocean, with a camera, I don't know. Whatever you like to answer.
Don't try to win.
Okay, well, easy, but straightforward, I guess.
Let it go. Don't try to be right. Don't try to win the argument. Don't try to win the heat. Just be in the moment and appreciate it. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the adversity. The struggle is where you're going to learn your best lessons. So accept defeat. Get back up. Don't try to win.
Yeah.
Try to do your best.
It's a great one. So, Richard, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I look forward to look at Mrs. Pipeline. Please improve the distribution in this side of the world.
We will do. Yeah, we will do. Thank you, Alessandro. I really appreciate the interest. Really fun to talk to you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Great questions. Yeah, really fantastic. Also love the chance to connect to the international audience. So thank you for doing this on behalf of the global community, right? Because we can get really caught up in our own little neck of the woods here. So thank you.
Thank you. Aloha. Thank you.
Aloha. Thank you, Alessandro.
Hi, it's me again. I hope you enjoyed our today's episode. If you want to know more about us, please follow www.thetempleofsurf.com and all our social media. Mahalo!